Blog Talk Radio.
Carol the Coach. Sex, love, and relationships. We talk about it here.
Carol the Coach. Compassion with contemporary relevance.
I am a psychotherapist. I can be your personal life coach, and I can help you with your issues. There are no problems too small or too big. You can talk about anything.
Speaker, columnist, radio TV host, and commentator. Carol the Coach brings messages of wellness and empowerment within reach of everyday people every day.
Almost 5 years ago, I lost my soulmate in an accident. He was killed in a plane crash. Life just, for me, has seemed to stop.
There are groups all over the city. I teach one. It is a specific way to start thinking so that you shift how you see the world, which then shifts your energy, and then you feel better and you actually see things differently.
Carol the Coach. Always available, too, at carolthecoach.com.
Now, I've got Russell on the line.
I'm 47 years old. I'm a truck driver. I'm married. I have a wife in San Francisco.
Okay.
I haven't been home in 6 months. My thing is, I don't know if I have a sex addiction or what the problem is. Why do I want what I can't have? And as soon as I can have it, I don't want it anymore.
You're right on target when you say, I don't know if I have a sexual addiction. Well, guess what? Yes, you do. And you know what? That's my specialty, Russell, so you're at the right place. Continue.
I meet women online, and I'm in a different part of the country. I travel all 48 states, so I love sex.
I hear self-esteem issues. You never felt good enough, and you didn't feel like you were getting what you should have then, and you're reenacting that now. Do you want to change that about yourself?
You get what you need.
I got an interesting email this week. He says, thank you
for taking my call. And, I know that I've emailed you before, and I so appreciate that you did take my call, but now I've got another question. I have been doing everything you have said that I should do. I have proved to my wife that I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make her feel happy, healthy, and whole. And I am using AVR like crazy with her. And Carol, it's not working. What can I do? Well, that is a loaded question. First of all, this stuff takes time, and it really does take a concerted amount of effort to continue to do something that may look like it's not producing results. Now, there are 3 types of partners, and I'm going to ask you which one is your partner. And this is for anybody out there who may be married and using Help Her Heal, the empathy workbook for sex addicts to help their partners heal. The first kind of partner has been traumatized, and she really, really, really wants to see that the addict has changed his ways, his or her, but we'll say his right now. And despite the fact that she doesn't trust, because she's not going to get duped again, she does notice your changes, and she softens with those changes. Maybe not every time, but she does soften. And you can see that this is making an amazing difference in how the two of you are functioning. That's one type of partner. I don't know what makes her different from the second kind of partner. The partner who is so traumatized that she protects herself or himself by keeping you at bay, pointing out all your faults, criticizing your efforts, she's not willing or able, I guess I should say she's not able to deal with any positive change. She doesn't buy it. She doesn't believe it. She wants it. She needs it. but she's afraid. And so how does that show up? That shows up with anger, disbelief, criticism, sarcasm. And so you're pulling your hair out because you're doing all the right things, and it does not seem to be working at all. And so that might be the partner that you're describing right now in the email. I know you called me before. We talked about what you needed to do, and now you're not seeing the changes. Okay, that's partner number 2. So just to reiterate, we have partner number 1 who is able to see the changes and is able to acknowledge them ever so slightly and slowly. We have the next partner who is so guarded, so defended, so angry, so sarcastic, so critical, and is not willing to give you any grace. But I promise you, she still wants to see that you're doing the work. And then we have the third kind of partner who is so wounded that she's really not able to comment either way. So she's not even able to give you positive feedback. But she's also not really energetic enough to give you any feedback. And you know, that's probably a very depressed person who has just taken this betrayal trauma and sucked it up, soaked it up. I mean, it has enveloped her. And we say she's in the lower end of outside the window of tolerance. She's depressed, she's lethargic, she's not moving, she's not commenting. She's not fighting. She's not there. Now, obviously everybody wants a first partner, right? Because that's the partner that's going to be kind of resilient and show you right away that she's willing to accept some of the changes. But the truth of the matter is many, many, many sex addicts have partner number 2 and 3. So what do? Well, it's the same thing that I tell parents who are practicing good parenting skills, but they're not seeing the changes that they want to see. I say don't give up. Keep doing the next right thing. Keep moving one foot in front of the other. Practice the skills. Do them faithfully. And at least you can look at yourself, identify that you have integrity, and you're willing to help her heal. Now, here's the bad news. You know that my premise is that when you can see some positive change, when you as an addict know that you've caused the partner pain, and you keep reminding her of that and you see forward movement, it helps you to heal too. So it's a positive cycle. You know, we talk about things being auto-exacerbating, which means that they feed off of each other. They contribute towards each other. And obviously the word exacerbating means not in a positive way. Well, when you practice the right skills, it should make a difference. It means you have to give it more time. You have to be more patient. You have to contain her feelings, right? You've got to do this because you caused it. And now you got to put in the work. So, what do you do if you don't see that it's changing? You know, that is such a good question, and I want you to be protected. I want you to take into consideration that you are moving forward. You are practicing skills and principles and techniques that should be making a difference. And if it's not, and if she's still really, really angry, then I want you to use the 7 principles of conflict after betrayal. Yep, it's chapter 7 in my book on conflict. And those 7 principles are: how has your past contributed to your present day problems? Remember that 90% is about your past and not who you are today. So if there's conflict in the relationship, you got to say to yourself, not to her, and partners, if you're listening, I do want them to say this to themselves because they've got to protect themselves. They've got to keep working at it. They've got to develop more resiliency. So first of all, you say, okay, I know. She's angry about the past. She's angry about who I was. She's angry about the pain I caused. And 90% of that anger is about my past. But it's not who I am today. Then principle number 2. How do you hold yourself accountable for the pain that you've caused without going into the shame cycle? That is super important. So I want you to imagine you're a metaphor. You are a vessel for her pain. You're just going to hold it for her. You're going to say, I'm going to sit with you while you deal with this sadness because I know I caused it and you deserve me to sit right with you and watch you go through it because we're both miserable. Principle number 3. You have to remind yourself as an addict who is willing to do what it takes and is practicing good skills that this is not in response to who you are today, and that's the good news. Now, principle number 4. How will you be able to know that you're strong enough to endure her pain? How can you help her work through her own trauma and move beyond it and still work on your own recovery? I'm telling you, when I talk to addicts who show emotional maturity and they're like, I will sit with this because I know I did this and she deserves me to stand with her through this horrible pain, I think to myself, now that is a man who's learned emotional maturity. That's a man who wants to do it differently. So principle number 5. Principle number 5 says, how do you remind yourself that the issue is not about you? It's about her trauma response from your acting out in the past. You have to keep saying, this is her trauma. This isn't even her. This is her trauma protecting her and keeping us at a distance because she feels safer that way. And then principle number 6. You say to yourself, hey, this is not who I am today. This is about the consequences of my past actions. And I need to continue to recognize that these are the consequences of my past, and I will stay healthy as long as I stay in good recovery and sit with her and her pain. And then principle number 7 is, how can I tell myself I won't give my past guilt and shame the power to make me feel blank? Maybe the blank is inadequate. Maybe the blank is inferior, guilty, shamed, hurt. You pick the word. But you say to yourself, I won't give my past guilt and shame the power to make me feel blank. So find that word, put it in the example, and then what I really want you to know is that you can get through this. You can stand strong. It's part of who you are in your recovery, your relational recovery. Oh, the sexual addiction is tough stuff. And that's why I have on Michael Salas from Vantage Point Dallas Counselling. You know, he is really working on the controversy of so many therapists that A, either don't think sexual addiction exists, or B, they don't know what it is, and so they just misunderstand. And they say, I'm not going to endorse that. That's boys just being boys. That's women on the internet. There's no such thing as sexual addiction. And if we call it what the World Health Organization has called it, compulsive problematic sexual behavior, people haven't even heard of that term yet. So they're really confused. And so Michael says that even though many therapists don't agree on what sex addiction is, or even if it exists, we as a community of helpers have to get clear about this so that we can treat the behavior that's interfering with individual recovery and personal growth in relationships. And so, what can we do as a community to unpack our clients' narratives and help them establish boundaries and find the label that best fits them? I recently spoke to a group of National Association of Social Workers, and I did that on helping couples through sexual addiction. And I got a call from the executive director of our Indiana branch, and she said, Carol, we have people from ASECT, which is a wonderful organization of sex educators and counselors, but they don't believe in sexual addiction. And so they were really raising a fuss over the fact that I was going to do a workshop on it because they felt I was proposing something that didn't exist. And, I said to her, let's change the name. It's not important what we call it. It's important how we treat it. And I'm not hung up on sexual addiction. I can call it compulsive problematic sexual behavior or sexual problematic behavior. What matters to me is that I, as a therapist, help my clients and their families get healthy. And so I'm not going to get all worked up, even when there are some organizations that say this sex addiction is all made up to provide propaganda so that certified sexual addiction therapists can make money off of people. So, Michael, I want to welcome you to the show because I know you've heard it just like I have. Welcome to Sex Help with Carol the Coach.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it felt like I had read some of your blogs, some of your emails, and it felt like you really understood the dilemma that we're facing as we're working with these folks. So tell me a little bit about how you got involved with the struggle and the controversy.
Well, so I'm trying to think of when I got into the CSAP community, probably 7 years ago or so now. And anyway, I was working a lot with sex addiction at the time, and I wanted to get some kind of deeper work in sex therapy to help some of the couples I was working with reconnect. So I knew prior to that sex addiction was kind of a hot topic term, but it was when I joined the ASECT community that I realized what a hot button issue it was. And so I was kind of I was seeing some stuff, and I thought that they were, really good, legitimate conversations about, what's the right terminology, what should we be doing, how should we best be helping our clients. But then I also saw some things that sometimes weren't kind of spot on with my experience. And so the way that I kind of was in the controversy was when I started sharing my experience a little bit. And I think like a lot of us kind of at this point, we're kind of in this, these polarized kind of conversations for lots of reasons. And so there was kind of a pull to have it become polarized. And so I think that, when I was kind of trying to hang in the middle and try to have kind of a balanced conversation about the experience that I had, I think there was kind of online in some of the organizations that I was part of, kind of some pool to kind of go one way or the other. So that was kind of, I think, how I got in the controversy, was oddly hanging in the middle. And so trying to focus more on the clients and not just the politics of it all.
Well, that makes sense. So in some ways, you, like so many of us, are caught in the middle. And I even feel like ASAC professionals are caught in the middle because they've been very oriented and trained to be porn neutral and sexuality neutral. And it does feel like we in the CSAC community are perhaps pathologizing our clients by saying they have an addiction. Would you not agree?
Yeah. So yeah, I've experienced that sometimes with younger therapists that I'm working with. You know, I supervise interns, and so sometimes I'll hear them say, you know, if you're a CSAT, aren't you shaming clients, you know, from even just having the credential? And so what I end up hearing from them kind of later on as they're, you know, kind of moving through their professional growth experience is that, you know, they have people who come in and the person's in crisis and feels like they can't stop. You know, if pornography is one possible example. And they're kind of puzzled because they're like, okay, wait, this isn't what I was anticipating when I was hearing that the label would be shameful. I didn't know, you know, I wasn't really well equipped on what I actually need to do with this by just being told that this didn't exist. And so when you know, I was trying to kind of, actually when I, you know, wrote the book, one of my goals was to kind of help people think beyond, you know, whether they think the label exists or not as a therapist, and instead focus on if you have somebody sitting in front of you and they think that is what is going on with them, or they're in crisis, you know, this is one label that can give you some kind of language to kind of walk with them through whatever they're going through. So yeah, that definitely is a big part of the experience that I've had as well.
Yeah, now tell everybody about the book you wrote and the reasoning behind the book.
Yeah, so so the book is called Bridging the Sex Addiction Divide. It's got a subtitle of Mindful Considerations for Vulnerable Clients. One of the big a lot of the controversies that are surrounding the label of sex addiction are concerns that it's shaming for LGBTQ clients, for non-monogamous clients, and for those who are involved in kink or BDSM and some of these kinds of sexual lifestyle behaviors, etc. And so what I initially started writing the book, though, was actually I was just kind of writing through some stuff because I actually needed to sort through some stuff on my own as I was kind of hanging in the middle and kind of ended up in the crossfire a little bit. I was trying to figure out how can I be part of both of these communities, and should I, to be transparent. And I kind of get into that a little bit in the book. And so I was kind of trying to sort out, is there a middle ground? Is that even possible? I ended up figuring out that there was, so that was a good thing. But and I also was back-channeled a lot of the time by a lot of therapists who were feeling similar, who were you know kind of wanting to just help the clients that they were, and they didn't really want to be involved specifically in the political crossfire that was kind of going on. And so I knew there was a need for this in our field. So I picked the three groups that I identified as, you know, pretty controversial, and tried to lay out how we can help them. help them if they come in and they actually do have, compulsive sexual behavior, or sometimes they might think they do, and it'll turn out over time that they may realize, what I was thinking of was compulsive sexual behavior was just me kind of coming to terms with my need to be authentic, and sometimes there's some overlap too. And so I wrote a book that kind of helped me even further sort it out for myself, to be honest. and then I wanted to, share that with others. So that was how I developed the book.
Well, yeah, and without stereotyping, certainly with my work with homosexual or bisexual men more than women, they typically do experiment a little bit more, and they do so with multiple partners. And so they will come in and say, I think I might have a sexual addiction. And as we tease that out, that's really the community that they're in. It's not compulsive. They just find themselves acting out what the community suggests. And so it's kind of like so much of our work. Sometimes people will come in and say, I molested a neighbor, when I was 7, and
Sure.
then I find out, well, it's really sex play. It wasn't molestation. There was
Sure.
no force.
Yeah, they were.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I agree with you that it really requires that we tease it out and help them to determine their feelings about it, what was the environment like, and that compulsivity or lack thereof. So would you talk about the 3 main groups that your book discusses?
Sure, yeah. So I work a lot myself with the LGBTQ community, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer. We also work a lot with people who are gender non-binary in our office, so people who don't specifically identify with the 2 genders that our culture basically prescribes us. And so I also do a lot of work with in the book I kind of put, and it gets complicated, but I basically put this in kind of one group, but people who come in with what would historically be described as fetishistic desires. I put that in quotes in the book because it's another label. It's the label that we use, but again, we use labels to kind of help us easily kind of classify something. And so I'm not positive that it's the best way to classify, but it was a way in the book to kind of talk about a certain group of people. So people who may have some desire to certain situations, certain objects, and the idea that adult sexuality is consensual. And so as long as people are open and they're having open discussions about this, then whatever people want to do. BDSM and kink, kind of more kinky behaviors, sometimes some mindful pain and use of pain in sex, or dominance and submission, that type of thing, and then non-monogamy. And so consensual non-monogamy, where people are making decisions to have an open relationship, to be polyamorous, date multiple people, but they're being open about it. They're not keeping secrets. And so those are the 3 primary groups that I've seen a lot of controversy on about sex addiction, and the concern that sex addiction is shaming to those groups, and some believe that it's inherently shaming. I think that there's a way to have a more nuanced conversation about it.
Absolutely. So then you have found that within the CSAC community, there are people that maybe misdiagnose or lump together clients under just one umbrella.
Right. And I don't, but here's the thing, and I get into this in the book too. I don't actually think it's just the CSAT community. I think our field has a history of this, our field has a history of using labels in kind of a particular way. So I know this particular label has its, has a lot of controversy, but the truth is that, the DSM is built on labels. A lot of the labels struggle with research, which is one of the controversies around sex addiction, is that some people don't feel that the research demonstrates it adequately. But, the truth is that not all of them, but a lot of the labels in the DSM don't have the research to show that, 100% we know that that's what we should call it. So, there's a lot of possible ways that the label, so it's not just CSAT, that's ultimately what I'm saying. So there's a lot of possible ways that labeling can be harmful if we're not doing it mindfully. And so sex addiction is just one of those labels. So I don't think that it's just specific to CSATs. Now, I do think our field has a long history with homosexuality, for example. It was in the DSM. I think we're still overcoming that history. There are groups of certain organizations who will use the term sex addiction, and they're not all CSAT based. A lot of them, I would say maybe the majority of them are not, where they will say that they are, they'll tell gay men, you need to go and work on your sex addiction for your sexual orientation. And so because they're using that already hot button term, it makes our work kind of harder in a way, in that we're trying to help people look at their shame and work through and reduce their shame around their sexual orientation. But then we have programs like that are syncing sex addiction with things that are unethical, like conversion therapy. So.
Yeah, and
that's
let's
how
talk
I think
about that
it.
for a minute, because not all of our listeners know about conversion therapy. And,
Sure.
I know that oftentimes, well, you and I both do not endorse in any way, shape, or form conversion therapy. But sometimes when one identifies as gay or lesbian and their faith doesn't believe this is appropriate, they might recommend conversion therapy. So tell our listening audience what conversion therapy is.
Yeah, it's under conversion therapy or reparative therapy, and there's a few other kind of key terms that people need to kind of watch out for, like same-sex attraction. That tends to be another term. But basically, it's the idea that somebody should change their sexual orientation, or kind of more modern, a more modern focus is that you have, these people will tell their clients that they have same-sex attractions that they should control. And so the goal a lot of times is, although you have that, that's something that you need to manage. You need to learn how to control that. You need to live a heterosexual lifestyle. And so it's really a push for people to live a heterosexual lifestyle.
Yeah, and what was that movie that was so popular probably 2 years ago? Wasn't it with Nicole Kidman and
Oh yeah, Boy Erased.
Yes, exactly. And certainly I made the assumption you're not at all a proponent of conversion or reparative therapy, and I know I'm not. And yet,
well, I'm gay, so no, I'm not. I'm openly gay, so no, definitely not.
So now let's talk about not your open gayness, but, obviously there are lots of different people in different categories. I know that I worked for a hospital setting, and I got all the requests for assistance in transgender assignment and fetishes and like cross-dressing. And, there are just a lot of assumptions. First of all, most therapists don't want to talk about sex at all. They'd rather leave that off the table. And I get that.
Sure.
It's definitely, but you still need to be educated about it. Now, what do you believe it means if a man is wearing women's clothing?
Yeah, it can mean a lot of things. And so you have to have a very, kind of nuanced, individual conversation about it. It can mean nothing. So what I mean by that is it can really mean you might just like the feel of certain types of clothing. A lot of times in my experience when I've worked with people on that, sometimes there's some education about it, but it might be the feel of certain fabrics, women's underwear is what I would use as an example, as a kind of stereotypical example, but they might like the feel of that. It can mean, that there's some gender exploration that the person, that person is curious about, so that man may have some curiosity about exploring their gender and may, it's hard to say that just based on that experience, but it may question their gender more, I guess is a better way. A lot of times therapists may think that, or even partners might think that means that their, husband is gay. I don't, there's not a lot of evidence that, most gay men honestly like to wear men's clothing. just fine. We like men's clothing. So it doesn't necessarily mean anything in particular about sexual orientation. If a man is wearing women's clothing, it may mean something about gender, and it may mean something really big about gender in that the person is questioning their gender. It may mean something very, minor, and that they just like a little bit of exploration, a little bit of the feel, that kind of a thing. But it rarely means something specific about sexual orientation.
And so again, that's where we cannot make one assumption. I mean, I can really appreciate the fact that there just may be curiosity. There may be that kinesthetic component where it's not so much female clothing. I mean, many men that I've worked with, especially gay men actually, they like wearing panties because of the nylon or the silk, but they also like wearing tight undergarments that are workout clothes. They love the feel, and I get that.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, do you believe that mixed orientation marriages work? I mean, because we're seeing more and more of that.
Yeah, so not a lot, and so I know that's a pretty bold statement. So where I have seen them work, and so by mixed orientation marriage, gay, straight, lesbian, straight, or one that a lot of people don't think about because I think people think that bisexual people can live a straight lifestyle, but bisexual straight is still a mixed orientation marriage, and more and more people are coming out in their marriages as bisexual or pansexual. So in bisexual, pansexual marriages, a lot of times what it shifts is sort of the authenticity component of somebody being more open about that part of who they are. But somebody, it's just as likely that somebody who's bisexual might want a monogamous relationship as anyone else. When the person, so when I say not usually, I'm speaking more about the gay, straight, mixed orientation marriage. And in those situations, a lot of times there's a desire to, date and explore a type of love that, hadn't really happened before. And that can take its toll on the marriage. Now, I have worked with and have had colleagues who have worked with some older couples who, have just been together for so long that they're feeling like they don't, want to change things. The other thing that's kind of tricky about that particular situation is I don't always see them, years down the road. Sometimes I do, but sometimes you don't know what ends up happening, in our client stories. And the other ones that I will see, sometimes work out is if they decide to have a consensual, non-monogamous relationship where they, mindfully open up their relationship and set some solid boundaries around that. But that's, a lot of times it's still hard.
Well, absolutely. And, you're bringing up terminology that I think most of us understand, but I'm just going to clarify.
Sure.
Pansexual. What is that?
Pansexual is, I'll oversimplify, so it's because there can be a lot of variants, but it's based in a real basic definition. It's attraction, desire, relational desire with people of all genders, and so all genders meaning not just man, woman, cisgender, man or woman. Cisgender meaning living in the gender were assigned, but also transgender, and there's a lot of genders actually. There's not just two, which is our culture thinks of just two genders, but so it's someone who has the potential to be in a relationship or attracted to any of these genders.
And so I guess when we were talking about that, you do believe that mixed orientation marriages can work. It's really up to the individual couple.
Yes, clients, absolutely. I think clients need to be figuring out what they want in their own lives. And something that I think therapists need to do is a lot of times we need to step back and, kind of reframe, hold a mirror up to our clients and say, hey, what do you see? Not telling them what we see. So if that is something that they feel like they want, it's not out of the realm of possibility. There are situations where it is possible. Research shows that a lot of times it doesn't work, but again, people need to make their own individual goals.
Well, and so yes, they can work, but research shows generally that might be too much of a stretch in terms of their values, their ability to be fluid with each other.
Right.
So many of my clients and friends that were gay or lesbian prior to them either coming out or recognizing that were married. And, and they lived a heterosexual lifestyle until they chose not to.
Sure.
What do you think about that? What should you do if you realize that you're gay or lesbian and you're married in a heterosexual relationship?
Yeah. So, I think, first of all, I think that it's understandable. There's a whole generation that, it can happen to, I don't want to make it sound like it can't happen to the millennial generation, but there are, I think it's less common. in that generation. We again, there's a whole generation where it was very pathologized, and it wasn't that long ago, to be considered, gay or lesbian or, what they would call the homosexual, if I put that in quotation. So it was very shaming, and it still can be in communities, depending on what community you're in. So I think the first thing to do is some self affirmation about that personal experience. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to feel fearful of losing connections in your life. And sometimes people are, I think because we progressively are, moving to, thankfully a society that's, more open-minded. But I think in some ways we feel like people should be farther along than they are on their journey. And so I think sometimes it's important to just remind people that it's okay to feel a struggle with that, because I think that that's where people can really start even shaming themselves for struggling as much as they are. And what I really recommend people do is they, maybe try to find somebody who they think is going to be supportive and not tell them, what to do. They're just going to let them kind of have their feelings. Obviously you and I, because we're in the field, I tend to recommend, people find an affirming therapist, or a therapist who has some understanding of LGBTQ coming out processes and that kind of a thing. But it doesn't always have to be a therapist. I mean, a lot of times people are stunned that there is a friend who is really willing to be supportive. So sometimes people, if they can identify, a couple of those people, I think sometimes in the 12, in some of the 12-step communities that our clients go to, there's some really affirming people in those communities. And sometimes it's fine to put some trust in one of those people too. So I think trying to find those people who are going to just kind of let you walk through it without judgment and without shaming you, I think that can be a powerful first step. Sometimes that's a partner, to be truthful. A lot of times partners do have a sense. They have always kind of wondered. And in those situations, it can actually bring a level. It doesn't mean that it's easy for the partner, but it can bring a level of validation for the partner too, when they find out. And so sometimes, partners and the couple together are able to kind of hold some space for each other. That really just, depends on the situation. But just, trying to look in your life and first of all, validating yourself and your own emotions on it, and then trying to figure out, if they're, who are those safe people to start talking to about it.
Well, you mentioned therapists, and I'm wondering what would your recommendation be if somebody, understandably says, you know what, I am part of the LGBT community, or I know that I'm gay, but I'm married, or how can they seek the best help possible? I know that you can't possibly know every state, every agency, but what would you tell them to do? Where do they Google? What do they do?
Sure, yeah. Looking at, there's a few things they can do. So I'll say this, though. It's not, the line isn't always at specifically whether the therapist is friendly to, LGBTQ people, because I have worked with clients who have gone to see a therapist who says, look, this is who you are. You need to accept that. You need to come out. You need to, and pushing people before they're ready has some potential harmful effects too, because it can kind of sometimes people can get too overwhelmed. In our work, a lot of times we're trying to help people walk through things without having them blow up, basically, and get overwhelmed. So, a lot of times therapy pushes clients on the edge of what they, their current tolerance level is to the situations they're in or the emotions that they're dealing with. And we're also talking about people who might be dealing with compulsive behaviors. And so, if that person does have that, it means that they likely struggle with some emotional coping skills already. And so one of the things you do want to have a therapist who is maybe going to nudge you, but not insist that you do anything specific. There could be some boundaries and some outliers there always are, but in general, one who is going to appreciate you, kind of living your own life in a way that feels right for you at the time. And so that, can mean, somebody who just, sits and listens to why you're not ready to tell anybody. And so it just depends on what your current needs are. Maybe that's one step that I'd recommend is, what do you feel like you're ready to do, and finding, asking that therapist, how much would you push me? If there is kind of some pattern of compulsivity too, I think that it's important to have a therapist who is LGBT, Q affirming, friendly, but also who is going to work on, emotional intelligence and helping you become aware of your emotions as well. And so the questions I'd really be asking are, you can ask, are you affirming, are you friendly, but also, are you going to let me walk through this journey at my own pace, or, are you going to insist that I walk through it at, your pace instead? I think it's okay to, get pretty frank with the people that you might be working with and building this really powerful relationship with.
Yeah, so what you're really saying is that it's important for our clients, when they know something doesn't feel right, to be able to assert themselves with their therapist and remind them that they probably know what's best for them. And if the therapist continues to push, it may be time for a different therapist.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So I so appreciate the work you're doing with clients. Let everybody know about your website and how they can get a hold of you if they need further information. I know that you can be found at www.vantagepointdallascounseling.com. Do you ever do any virtual work?
No, it's all it is all local. I do have therapists on my team who do it, but I really like that kind of face to face work. So that's work that I do with clients. But yeah, and people can. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say, and does your website have any resources that somebody could check out and get more information about these topics in general?
Yes. So we, thanks for asking that. We have a huge blog on our website with tons of information about, relationships, sex, sexual orientation, self-acceptance, on a variety of issues, and also a lot of information on trauma and, the compulsive sexual parts as well. And so our website's a great place to go for that. And there's a little bit on social media too, but I would say that our primary hub for everything. And there's actually a resource hub on our website where people can get a lot of just kind of basic information about whether it's sex addiction, sex therapy, sexual dysfunctions, a lot of different things about sex and relationships, and also trauma. We do a lot of trauma work here.
Well, thank you so much for making this a platform, I definitely heard you saying you had some questions, and so you started doing the research, and obviously you got a passion, and it seems like you're an advocate. So, Michael Salas, thank you again for sharing your wise information with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
All right. You make it a good one, and talk to you
Okay,
soon.
all right. See ya. Bye.
Bye-bye. All right. So, as you can see, this is always an interesting topic because lots and lots of people wonder what's right, what's wrong, who are they, what can they ask for, who can they talk to. And that's what this show's all about, giving you information so that you're not alone in your journey. Hey, I'm Carol Jurgensen-Sheets, a.k.a. Carol the Coach. I want you all to have a wonderful Thanksgiving, and we'll catch you here next Monday night, same time, same place, for Sex Help with Carol the Coach. And there will only be one of you at all times, so fearlessly have the courage to be yourself. Make it a good one.